Great.
So we're going to get started here. I just started sharing this live on Facebook. So hello to all those out there in Facebook land. And I also just started recording this webinar. So it will be available after the fact to share with people who couldn't make it today. So thank you all for coming. Our webinar today is on the Transition Healthcheck with Michael Thomas of Transition Network. My name is Don Hall. I'll be your host. Before we get started, I just want to make a few quick announcements. First of all, this webinar is sponsored by Transition US. We are a national hub for the International Transition Towns movement, which is actively building local resilience and self-reliance from the bottom up in thousands of communities all over the world. If you're not familiar with us, you can learn more about us, find a transition initiative near you, sign up for our e-newsletter, and donate to support programs like this one at our website, which is transitionus.org. Next, I want to tell you about a few other upcoming events that you might be interested in, just to put those on your radar. The next one we got coming up is Reclaiming Our Soul from the Industrial Growth Society, a deep dive into the inner transition with Kaya Seven and Rebecca Blanco, both involved with our newly formed Inner Transition Network. And that will be on Thursday, January 25th. After that, we have How to Get Media Attention for Your Community Project with Tom Llewellyn of Shareable on February 8th. And we have another webinar on igniting the local food revolution in your community with Michael Brownlee and Lynette Marie Hanthorne of Local Food Catalysts. And that will be on Wednesday, February 21st. All these events are free, and you can find out more about them and register for them on our website, which again is transitionus.org. Finally, about this webinar and platform, we'll run for about 75 minutes today. Beginning with some introductory remarks from Michael, followed by an interactive exercise and breakout group discussions. We'll have a little bit of Q&A. As I said before, this webinar will be recorded and shared on our YouTube channel within the next week or two. To preserve sound quality, everyone is muted, but as we go into Q&A periods, and even right now, you can click on the little Q&A module on the bottom of your screen, and you can type in any questions that come up for you as we go. We'll also open it up to Q&A at various points during this webinar, and we'll put you on video and audio so you can ask those questions directly. And if at any time you have a question, you can put your hand up. I believe if you're on phone, that's by clicking, typing in *9. If you're on your computer, you can go under participants, and there should be a button there to raise your hand. And I see Scott Finley has a hand up, and I'll just take this one before turning it over to Michael, and we'll get going here. Okay. All right. Yes, Scott.
Hello. Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just following up on Henning's comment. I think the reason that you're appearing kind of on my screen a little purplish is that you're more backlit than you are front lit. You've got a window back there and a light behind you. If you can get more light on the front, you'll look a lot better.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm not going to be doing most of the talking. I'm going to turn it over to Michael now, so you can look at his smiling face.
Okay.
But thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Scott, back to attendee. And yeah, without further ado, turning it over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Unfortunately, I can't see you all, so I'm in my head. I have a big picture of lots of people listening. My name's Mike Thomas, and I work for Transition Network. Part of my role is Transition Initiative Support Coordinator, is looking at developing support resources and ways to support transition groups internationally. So some of the stuff I've done is we produced a central guide to transition, which is now being translated into lots of different languages and being used throughout the world, and sort of links in with the Healthcheck and the structure of the Healthcheck, which I'm going to go through with you now. So just to give a bit of an overview of the structure, what I'm going to do is give a bit of history about the Healthcheck, how it came about, what we see the purpose of it being, and then looking at the structure of it and how that structure was put together, so you can understand sort of a bit of the background to it and why it's a useful tool for transition groups. In fact, it's a useful tool for any group in reality. So there's lots of other groups which have taken this. In the UK, Positive Money, for example, took it and adapted it slightly for their movement. So the whole thing's open source. So if people want to use it in other groups or want to take it and change it, that's great and fine by us. So just to bear that in mind as well. Once I've gone through that, I'm going to get you to pair up. I think we can do that through Zoom webinar. So and get you to have a go at doing the Healthcheck, just to have a little taster of it. So you get a bit of a flavour of how it works, and then we can then come back afterwards and can answer any questions, etc. on that. And also there'll be an opportunity to ask any questions about the structure and the history of it as well, once I've gone through that. So just to give you a bit of an overview of how the Healthcheck came about, it was developed by Transition Network and Oxford University. There was some grant funding that we got in order to do that. So there was a lot of thinking behind what is sort of quite a simple tool, but actually there was quite a lot of complex thinking behind getting it in the structure that it is now for groups to use. And then it was also tested with a lot of transition groups in the international movement, and then tweaked and refined in order to make it as useful as possible. And so what we see the tool as, what the idea of it is that it's there to help your group come together and analyse what's going well, and then also identifying areas that may be more challenging or stuff that you could develop in order to make doing transition easier in your community. One thing that to make very clear about this Healthcheck tool is that it's not a test. This is not like you fail or you pass sort of activity. The main point of it is to help you reflect really on what you're doing in your transition group, and where there might be some gaps or where there might be some challenges, and getting you to think a bit more deeply about that. And what we found is one of the best things about the Healthcheck is that it's an opportunity for your group to come together. We recommend about once a year, although you can do it as often as you want, in order to sort of look back over the year and to sort of reflect on what it is you've achieved over that year, what was successful, what was a challenge, what went really well, in order to sort of take that information and feed into how you're going to plan the year ahead. And it also, what we found is that it can highlight things that to have, we always like to think that people would have some form of celebration at least once a year. So when you're doing a Healthcheck, if there are things that come out, you go, yes, we did that really well this year. So it's a really good tool for like really thinking about what you've achieved and celebrating that. And one thing that we found about that is that it's quite rare that a lot of groups in general do that sort of thing, mainly because we have the tendency to want to move quickly on to the next thing, rather than reflecting on what we've done and what we've achieved in the previous year. So that's sort of an overview of the bit of the history. And so just to elaborate a little bit more on the purpose, that it's sort of been designed in order to enable the group to reflect on what's been working well, what could be strengthened, as well as what isn't working and needs to change. And in order to do that, it's there to prompt conversations. So it's not like when you see the structure of it, you'll see that you give a score to each section of the health check, each statement within it. You'll see that. But the point is not to just go through and go, well, we did really well on that bit, that's a 5, and then the next bit, that's a 4, and then you've sort of done the health check in quarter of an hour. The point is that it's there to stimulate conversation and to unpick what you've actually been doing and what's been going well, and why that was going well, or why it was a challenge, and what was challenging about it. So it unearths what may be unseen dynamics, or gives people an opportunity to reflect properly on what's been going on. So it also, as I was saying, it enables you to celebrate your strengths, your successes. And we would also say that, it's also an opportunity to celebrate failures, because failures are we always see them as actually good learning experiences. It's the fact that you've tried something and it didn't work means that you wouldn't do it the same way again. So it's definitely like a learning process. And then what we hope is that once you've gone through the whole thing, then when you're planning your work ahead for the following year, that it then influences what next steps you might take. You have more clarity about what you could do again, which worked well, or what you might need to change and tweak in order for it to be more successful. So that's sort of what the sort of the purpose of it. So now I'm going to quickly go on and talk a bit about the structure. And the structure of the health check is based on this thing called the transition animal. And I'm just going to get up a picture of it so you can see. So hopefully everyone can see that. Now we're sharing my screen. So the transition animal, in this case, it's a deer. And that's mainly because I grew up in the Forest of Dean in England, and we have a lot of deer around us. So it can be any animal. We recommend that people adapt it into the animal that they like the most. It's really a metaphor for what we see as a healthy transition group. So each of these areas that you can see around the animal, like reflects and celebrates, vision, having fun, healthy group, networking and partnerships, practical projects, community involvement, part of the movement, they all come from our experience of transition in many different contexts, cultures and countries. And they are what we found make up what we call the 7 essential ingredients that help a transition group to be successful. You'll see that there's more than 7 there, but we don't class, some of them come under each other. And so if you think about each one, it begins to make more sense. So like if you look at the legs, you have the healthy group, networking and partnerships, practical projects and community involvement. And they are the practical things that help develop transition in your community and move it forward. So if your group's not functioning well and there's a lot of conflict within it, and you're finding it difficult to meet, or or there's any kind of problems within that, it's very difficult to move transition forward. In order to develop transition in a community, you need to have involvement with the community. And a lot of the ways that you do that would be through running practical projects and through working in partnership with other groups and networking within your community. So they're the sort of the things that move it forward. Secondly, if it's really useful to have a clear vision. Hence, you can see vision is quite near to the animal's eyes, and that's, we think that it's really useful if your group has sat down and thought about what it is they want to achieve and how they're going to get there by utilising, practical projects involvement and what's community involvement and what sort of thing is you're hoping to achieve. Then we have reflects and celebrates, which part of the health check sort of fits under that sort of area, is that it's an opportunity for then, to always be thinking about what you've done, how you've done it, has it worked, and celebrating that fact. And then having fun, which also comes under reflects and celebrates. We've put it near the mouth because the deer's, I think it looks like the deer's smiling. So we think, it's very important that transition, definitely has an element of fun within it and that people enjoy what they do. And then we've got inner transition. And inner transition is sort of above roughly where the heart might be. But it's about the inner transition is sort of embedded within nearly all of the others, in the sense of that it's sort of about how we create this new culture or new way of doing things that we want to see happening in the world. And a lot of that particularly through, starting with our own group and making sure that, people, that it's a healthy and productive and fun place to be. So inner transition is sort of embedded within all of it to a degree. And then the animal is situated in the part as being part of a wider movement, hence part of the movement sort of being the context that it exists in. So just give me 2 seconds. So that sort of then reflects the structure of the health check. So each one of those, but we've also included actually a how to start transition, developing your initiating group section as well within the health check. So I just go through the structure of the health check. Is that we have how to start transition, developing an initiating group. Then there's healthy groups. Then there's vision. Then there's community involvement. Then there's networks and partnerships. Then there's reflect and celebrate. Then practical projects. Then inner transition. And finally being part of the wider movement. And each one of those areas in the health check, which I can just change the screen so you can see. Give me 2 seconds. Each one of them has a series of statements and a pie chart below it. So the pie chart looks like this. And each statement, you then score yourself out between 1 and 5 on how well you're doing. With 1 being that this is something that we don't really do or something that we struggle with, up to 5 being this is something that we're really good at and something that we feel we do really well. I'll just give you just find an example now of what the statements look like for you. Okay, so this is an example of what the statements look like for a healthy group. So as you can see, they're just quite general statements. They're there really to prompt conversation and for people to sort of explore a bit. So, so for example, number 1, our group has clear and agreed aims and objectives. And it might be that people have never had that discussion about aims and objectives, but there is sort of a common feeling that people are moving in the same direction. In which case, it might prompt the conversation to the group to begin to consider is that are we all on the same, are we all thinking the same? Do we all have the same aims and objectives? Would it be useful to write them down? Is this something we want to explore a bit more? And the same thing is, as you go down the list, there's stuff like members are clear about their responsibilities and roles. We have effective meetings with a clear agenda, discussion and minutes. We spend time in our meetings reflecting on how we work together, which is sort of more of like the inner transition aspect of healthy groups. We have discussed and come to agreement about how power and leadership work in our group. So there's a whole lot of things within that can be unpacked and thought about. And one of the things to be really clear about is that you'll find that the health check probably raises a lot of questions when you're doing it. And we're not saying that you have to have a code of conduct or you have to necessarily have agreed processes for making, recording and following up on decisions. But what we think is useful is that at least you've thought about that and had that discussion around whether this is something that your group wants to do or not. So that they're there really as prompts and more to get people to think about, are these the sort of things that we want? That being said, we have found that groups that do put structures in place or do have these sorts of things there function a lot better and tend to have less conflict, particularly in this healthy group section. They tend to have less conflict and less problems because people have had those initial discussions up front. So when something happens, it's definitely like there's been agreement around how things are done. So I'm just gonna stop sharing that. Okay. So there's a few other bits that I just want to talk about. Is that the health check itself is once you go through the whole thing, you'll find that you may have scores lower than you think, and some will be quite high, and it will begin to get you to think a lot about how the what it is you want your group to do and how to move forward. And this is where we would say that we wouldn't expect your group to be scoring 5 out of 5 for everything in the health check. In fact, we'd be quite worried if that was the case. So it's more about like having a holistic view of how your group is doing, and hopefully the health check will enable you to maybe think a bit about stuff you might want to work on a bit more, or stuff that you might want to repeat the year coming, or raises more questions about how, where you might want to put more effort in, or the fact that, we maybe want to think about rethinking about our vision, or we might want to do more community involvement. So that I think you'll find it probably raises lots of questions, and it's up to you as within your group to decide what with that information. And one of the things that we found can be useful is if you've got someone from outside your group who would come in and help you and help facilitate doing the health check, can be quite useful, because they can be, as an external person, they can question how you're answering it and pull out more information. If you're all sat around in a group, there's a lot of assumed knowledge, whereas just having a thing about, sorry, just got a message from Don. Okay. Sorry. So it's more about you taking that information and deciding how you want to move forward with it. And like I said, having people externally come in and do it and help facilitate that can be really useful. Sometimes if you're nearby to another transition group, maybe one person could go to the other group and vice versa, and help facilitate it and go through it. And that way you get to hear about how different groups are approaching these different areas within the health check. Once you've done the health check, it sort of relates to all the areas, all the different areas I talked about, the healthy groups, vision, community involvement. We have a whole range of support resources on the Transition Network website. If you just go to Transition Network, do transition, and you'll see the 7 essential ingredients. And under each of those essential ingredients, there's a whole, there's probably about 40 resources all in all, which can help you with decision making, with running events, with how to involve the community more, how to set up networks and partnership. So there's a whole range of resources there for you to use. And that the reason, I mean, we try to make sure that everything links in together. So you get the transition animal, which links into all the categories of that link into the structure of the health check, and then the health check links into what we call the support offer that we have on the Transition Network website. So everything is quite easy to find and navigate, and hopefully, makes it a lot easier for you to address any issues that you'd like to look at, and so there's a sort of a clarity to the whole thing. So that's me sort of finished in terms of the description of it. I was hoping that we were going to go into breakout rooms in a bit, but that may not be possible, Don's saying. But if we go into a couple of questions now, if anyone's got any questions on the health check itself, and then let's see if Don can let us know whether we can do that. So pass over to you, Don.
Can you hear me now, Michael?
Yeah.
And see my video?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Just want to make a little disclaimer. I should have done this at the outset, but this is the first time we started using Zoom Webinar. Previously, we were using Maestro Conference, was an audio-only service. And so there might be a little bumps in the technology this time around, but I hope you'll be able to be a little patient with us. Looks like we may not be able to do breakouts. After this Q&A, though, I will turn off the recording and our broadcast to Facebook Live and see if that then becomes an option for us. Otherwise, we'll figure out another way to do this interactive portion. But yeah, like Michael said, if anybody has any questions right now, please, please either raise your hand or feel free to type into the Q&A module that's at the bottom of the screen, and I will turn on your audio and video. And for those who are on phone, again, the option is *9 to raise your hand. For those who are on computer, you can go right under participants. And there should be a button there that says raise hand. Yep, and Liz did type into the chat that Maestro is not an audio only. We were using the audio only package. But I think that this Zoom is going to be great once we get the full hang of it. I guess, well, all right, it looks like we got a question here, or a comment from Janet Lewis with Transition Sarasota. I like the concept of the tool and the discussion decisions that can result. So thank you for that, Janet. Yeah, we just recently started taking the health check with Transition US, adapting it to a national hub, and have really found it great at inspiring good conversations about our different perceptions of where our group is at, and helping us to really prioritize what are the most important things for us to work on, the things that we got the lowest scores on. So I really do think it is a wonderful tool, and we are hoping that all official transition initiatives will take this on here in the U.S. To do this once a year as part of their standard operating procedure. Other questions, either via the Q&A module or by raising your hands? Not seeing any at the moment. Okay, yep, Henning.
In it that wow.
I will promoting Henning to panelist and unmuting. Yes,
Can you
Henning.
hear me?
Yep.
Hi, Henning.
Can you tell me what the third topic is that you announced as a future webinars? There's one today. We're going to be talking about building resilience and self-reliance. Is that correct? Is that going to be a topic for discussion today? Or not?
I guess that's a question for me. I mean, resilience and self-reliance is one way of describing.
I wondered really how you selected these topics, and I didn't capture the third topic. I captured the first, building resilience and self-reliance, and the second, reclaiming our soul from the industrial economy, and the fourth one, igniting the local food economy.
Yep.
And what was the third one?
The third one was how to get media attention for your community project. Those are all separate webinars.
Okay.
And today's is focused on the Transition Healthcheck. And if you want to see a particular webinar, I'll be sending out a survey right after this event where you can suggest different webinar topics that you'd like to see offered.
Okay. So having filled that out, how did you pick those 4 topics? I guess I'm trying to get a sense for what Transition USA is really about. Why did you pick these 4 topics? Can you speak a little bit about that?
Well, I don't want to get too into the weeds on this because I think people came to learn more about the Transition Healthcheck.
All right.
But I definitely, if you haven't checked out our website before, I would greatly suggest going there. And often it's people suggesting webinars, saying this would be a good topic for you to cover. Sometimes it's emerging from conversations with leaders in the field. We try best to respond to what's up in the transition community at any given moment. So we do have a number of other questions coming up here about the health check. So
Okay.
I think we're going to move on to that. But thank you, Henning, and do feel free to contact me directly if you have any more questions on that specific topic. I'll put my email address into the chat. All right. So
I am finding you're glitching a little bit, Don. So
okay. Thanks for letting me know.
I'm not sure if that's my connection.
Maybe too many windows open here. We had a number of other questions come up via text. Scott Finley said, this is very straightforward. It occurs to me that this is what has been needed in our group to get more clear about where we're going. So that's a nice comment. And Shari Stuber from Transition Town Media asks, what's the distinction between community involvement and networking?
Yeah, I can answer that one. So we see community involvement as being more about how you engage your local community. So not necessarily other groups or other organizations, but the actual people who live and live within your community. Whereas networking, we see more as connecting with other groups or other people who are doing stuff within the community, but more at like a group level. So you've got the local people. So community involvement could be putting on like a local event where you invite people along to, or film showings, or anything where you as Transition engage with the local community sort of as a whole. And networking and partnerships we see as more different in the sense of, the networking is just connecting other groups, making sure that they know you exist, and maybe inviting them to your events or going to their events. And then partnership is more like where you would take work on a specific project together with maybe another organization. So hopefully, I think that might be clear. If not, let me know.
Yeah, that's great. Sherry said, got it, thanks.
Great, brilliant.
And yeah.
Oh, so could you go over I'm just looking at the questions now because I can see them as well.
Mm-hmm. Great.
So how to access the checklist, I don't know if you could stick the PDF link into the chat window, Don.
Absolutely.
The one. So Don would do that, Judy, and you should be able to access the whole Healthcheck there, and you can download it to use with your group. So Janet, I thought Don's comment about the Transition US's use of the tool was helpful. Do you have other examples that you would provide of teams using the tool, or perhaps the tool is very new? Okay, yeah, no, can do that. So in terms of quite a few groups have used the Healthcheck. One of the other things that I didn't mention in the conversation was that we're hoping to develop a way of aggregating the scores from the Healthcheck, where people could be able to input them into Transition Network website in order for us to get an idea of how the Healthcheck, how groups are doing internationally. So that's one other function of it. That's not available yet, but that's something that we're hoping to maybe implement in the future. In terms of other groups who've used the Healthcheck, there's quite a few groups who have utilised it. What we found is, so we went to work with a group in quite a few years ago, actually, just when we'd finished the Healthcheck had finished being developed, and we went along to a group which was really struggling actually to know how to move forward, what they wanted to do, were they doing enough, were they doing the right thing? So we sat down with them, and we actually went through the Healthcheck with them, about 4 or 5 people from their group, if I remember rightly. And what they found was that it just highlighted to them that actually they'd achieved quite a lot. They were actually quite advanced in terms of a lot of the stuff they were doing. But it also then highlighted to them the fact that I think there's a bit of stuff that came out around, maybe they needed to rethink about their vision, about what they wanted the group to do, and they needed to think a bit more about how they could get more people involved from the community. So what it did was it highlighted to them where there was stuff which was maybe where they needed to focus some energy in order to get the group up and running in a better way in terms of where they wanted to get to. So it was really a really useful activity for them, and that group's actually still going. They did feel that at that point, I think it was about 3 years ago now, that they were really questioning whether what they wanted to do, or they were really not clear on how to move forward. So it really helped them do that. So that's, and we also, we use it in Transition Network. We sort of, because we sort of know a lot about it anyway, we sort of think about these things a lot anyway. And that's what you sort of find actually is, if the more that you do the tool, the more you begin to consider those aspects of transition of what you're doing. So because it sort of plants seeds in your head when you're going, oh yeah, community involvement, and oh yeah, right. And then you begin to think, like, as you're going along throughout the year, you begin to think a lot more about what you're trying to achieve. And it can be that you could take a section, for example, if you really wanted to focus on getting the community more involved in your transition project, that you may utilize that section throughout the year and look at it. You might go, well, let's revisit that in 6 months or 3 months to see how we're doing. So you can use the tool in as many different ways as you want, really. Just seeing if we got any other questions. Doesn't look like it, unless we got. No.
Don't think so at this point. I think what we're going to do is wrap up with our friends out on Facebook. Thank you all for tuning in, to Jay and Les and Jessica and Nils and others. And stop the recording of this session, and then we'll proceed with a little interactive exercise. So thank you all for tuning in, and do hope that you take the health check.